Have you ever met someone who seemed perfect? Someone who made you feel like you were the only person in the world? That's what I thought I had. Until I discovered it was all a carefully constructed lie. My boyfriend wasn't just cheating on me. He was using my deepest insecurities against me in conversations with other women. I was broken, shattered on my bathroom floor. But in that moment of total despair, I remembered one tiny, insignificant detail he'd given me months before. A username and a password. And that was the key to the most psychologically satisfying revenge I could have ever imagined. If you know the soul-crushing pain of betrayal, and you live for the moment when the manipulator becomes the manipulated, you are in the right place. Hit that subscribe button, smash the like button, and get ready for a story of digital revenge so perfectly crafted, it still haunts him years later. Let's rewind. 8 years ago, I met a man who felt like a character from a movie. He was charming, attentive, and he listened in a way that made me feel truly, deeply seen. We had everything in common. It was like finding my missing half. I fell fast and I fell hard, opening up to him in a way I now know was way too soon. What I was experiencing had a name I wouldn't learn until later. Love bombing. He would orchestrate these grand romantic gestures that felt ripped from a screenplay. I remember one day, just 2 months in, he took me out on his small boat to a completely uninhabited island. He had prepared this gorgeous picnic lunch himself. He served limoncello. We went diving, and he surfaced holding a giant beautiful shell, pressing it into my hands as a token of his love. I mean, come on. Then, he took me to his childhood home. He showed me faded photographs of his parents, who had passed away, and he gave me his oldest, most cherished childhood toy. He told me it held his fondest memory. He was letting me into his most vulnerable spaces. I was convinced. This was it. He was the one. But then, the cracks began to show. It started small. A cynical comment about my outfit. A sarcastic jab about something I'd said that he found silly. They were like little paper cuts, but each one made me feel a tiny bit more insecure. Then, he started flirting with other women right in front of me. When I'd get upset and cry, he'd apologize profusely, blaming his own insecurities, and he'd revert back to that perfect romantic man for a few days. It was a cycle. A horrible, exhausting cycle of emotional whiplash. I was constantly pleading, constantly trying to prove my love, constantly draining myself to earn back a fraction of the affection he'd once given so freely. The exhaustion was a physical weight. I felt like I was walking on eggshells every single day, my stomach in a permanent knot, trying to anticipate what might set him off. The final straw came on a completely ordinary Tuesday. I got out of the shower, wrapped in a towel, my skin still warm from the steam. I walked into the bedroom and there he was, sitting at his desk, his back to me. On the screen was a familiar interface. The bright, hopeful colors of a popular dating site. My heart stopped. The air left my lungs. He heard me gasp and quickly minimized the window, spinning around with a smirk on his face. "Baby! Don't get the wrong idea," he said, his voice dripping with false reassurance. "I was just doing that to see if you'd get jealous. I wanted to see if you still cared enough to be controlling." The lie was so blatant, so insulting to my intelligence, that I just stared at him. I didn't believe him for a second. But in that moment, something else clicked in my memory. A tiny, insignificant moment from months ago. He was terrible with computers. Once, he'd called me, frustrated, asking for help setting up an account on a chess website. The process was complicated, and he grew impatient. He just blurted out the username and password he wanted to use over the phone. "Just do it for me," he'd said. I remembered it. Clear as day. The next day, when he left for work, I went to that dating website. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely type. I entered the username. I entered the password. The login circle spun. And then, I was in. What I saw on that screen didn't just break my heart. It obliterated my entire reality. It wasn't just flirty messages. There were detailed conversations about meetups. Conversations that made it clear he'd slept with other women. But the worst part, the part that felt like a physical blow to the chest, were the messages where he talked about me. He shared intimate details about our relationship, about my insecurities, about what he was dissatisfied with. He was using my vulnerability as a tool to gain sympathy from other women. I slid down the wall onto the cold bathroom floor. The sobs that racked my body were silent, desperate, primal. I cried for the man I thought he was. I cried for the future I thought we had. I cried until I was empty. Until there was nothing left but a cold, hard, crystalline clarity. He had taken everything from me. My trust, my love, my sense of self. And he thought he could just get away with it. Something in me broke. But it wasn't weakness. It was the last link of the chain holding me back. A cold, determined fury rose up to replace the grief. If he wanted to play games on dating sites, then I would become his favorite player. Phase 1. The bait. I created a profile. The first of many. I crafted a woman I knew would be his exact type, just different enough for me to be intriguing. I used photos of a friend who kindly agreed to help, a woman he'd never seen. I made her witty, charming, and just slightly hard to get. It took a few days of chatting. And then he took the bait. He suggested meeting. I feigned hesitation. I don't know, I'm kind of nervous to meet people from online. He insisted, turning on the charm. Don't worry, I'm not a serial killer, I promise. He wrote. I reluctantly agreed to meet at a large, busy coffeehouse downtown. The day of the date. I was a nervous wreck. I put on a hat and glasses, a half-hearted disguise. I got there early and chose a seat in a dark corner, my heart hammering against my ribs. Part of me hoped he wouldn't show that this was all a bad dream. 10 minutes before the meeting time, I did something cruel. I called him. On my real number. Hey, I said, trying to sound cheerful. What are you up to? Want to meet for lunch? His voice was smooth, effortless in its deception. Sorry, babe. I've got some errands to run. Rain check. I hung up, my hand trembling. My heart didn't sink. It plummeted. And then I saw him. He walked through the door of the coffee shop, looking casually confident. He ordered a coffee and sat down, checking his phone, waiting for his dream girl. I watched him. First he was patient. Then he started fidgeting, looking at every woman who walked in, checking his watch. And then, it happened. A woman walked in who bore a striking resemblance to the photo I'd used. His face lit up. He immediately stood up, approached her, and said something. She looked confused, then annoyed, and dismissed him. He was persistent. I saw her get visibly agitated, telling him to leave her alone before walking off. The look on his face was priceless. Confusion. Rejection. Embarrassment. He waited another 30 minutes, a growing look of pathetic desperation on his face, before finally slinking out. Later that afternoon, I sent him a message from the fake profile. Hey, I'm so sorry. I was there. I saw you. I didn't have the courage to come up. I'm so sorry, but I didn't feel the physical attraction I was hoping for. You seem great though. He wrote back, it's okay, no hard feelings. But I knew him. I knew the narcissistic injury this would cause. His ego would be bruised, and he'd be desperate to prove himself. So I did it again. And again. And again. Phase 2. The siege. I became a ghost in his machine. I created different profiles. Different women. Different personalities. I would chat him up, build his interest, arrange a meetup, and then ghost him. Sometimes I'd have her reschedule, building his anticipation, only to stand him up again. Sometimes, she would cancel at the last minute with a flimsy excuse. Over the next few weeks, I orchestrated at least 10 failed dates. Each rejection was a tiny cut to his overinflated ego. I was systematically dismantling his confidence, his game, his entire online persona. I watched him become more paranoid, more desperate in our real conversations. He'd complain about how flaky women were online. He couldn't understand why nothing was working. The irony was so thick you could taste it. Finally, I knew it was time. The revenge was complete. I asked him to meet me at a public park. He showed up, expecting a picnic, expecting to smooth things over after a rough patch. I didn't sit down. I just looked at him and said, "It's over. I know everything. You're a cheating son of a bitch." He immediately slipped into the routine. The wide, innocent eyes. The, "Baby, what are you talking about? You're being paranoid again. This is your jealousy talking." I let him talk. I let him dig his hole. And then I held up my hand to silence him. All those failed dates? I said, my voice eerily calm. Every single woman who stood you up? Who cancelled? Who found you unattractive? That was all me. The confusion on his face was instant. Then dawning comprehension. Then utter, sheer horror. His mouth actually dropped open. Wow! He stammered. I leaned in close, and with a sweet, vicious smile, I whispered his own username and password back to him. I watched the color drain from his face as he realized the sheer depth of the operation. That I had been the puppet master of his humiliation for weeks. That I had seen every pathetic, desperate message he'd sent to them. To me. I didn't wait for a response. I turned around and I walked away. I didn't look back. For the first time in years I felt light. I felt free. The power was back in my hands. The best part? Months later, he sent me a long, rambling email. He called what I did ingenious. He said it proved I was the love of his life. He said he was too scared to date online anymore because he both fears and hopes that every new woman is me. His punishment wasn't just a moment of humiliation. It was a life sentence of paranoia, knowing the one who understood him best was the one who engineered his downfall. If you believe that the best revenge is living well, but sometimes living well requires a little strategic chaos, hit that like button. Tell me in the comments, was this revenge justified? And subscribe for more stories of karma delivered with pinpoint precision.